never thought my life would change because of a noise complaint. My name is Chun Wei, and I'm a Beijing opera singer studying at the prestigious China Conservatory of Music. For 23 years, I've lived a life of discipline, tradition, and rigid expectations. Every note I sing, every gesture I make on stage, every breath I take has been carefully trained and refined according to centuries-old traditions that my family holds sacred. That night in October, I was practicing late in my small apartment near the conservatory, working on the intricate vocal runs required for my upcoming performance as the scholar in the Peony Pavilion. The walls of my building are thin, and I knew I was probably disturbing my neighbors, but the performance was only 3 days away, and I still hadn't mastered the emotional complexity of the final aria. The knock on my door was sharp and impatient. I assumed it would be Mrs. Liu from next door, complaining again about my late-night practice sessions. Instead, when I opened the door, I found myself face-to-face with someone who looked like he had stepped out of a completely different world. He was tall and lean, with dark skin and intricate tattoos covering his arms. His hair was styled in short dreads, and he wore baggy jeans, a graphic t-shirt, and expensive sneakers that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But it was his eyes that caught me. They were frustrated and tired, but also somehow familiar in their intensity. "Look, man," he said in accented English, his voice carrying the distinctive rhythm of South African speech. "I know you're doing your thing, but some of us are trying to work too. It's past midnight." I stared at him, trying to process this unexpected encounter. My English wasn't perfect, but I could understand him. What confused me was the realization that this stranger, who looked nothing like anyone in my carefully ordered world, was also an artist dealing with the same struggles I faced every night. "I'm sorry," I said in careful English. "I am practicing for performance. Very important." "Yeah, I get that. I'm working too." He gestured toward the apartment across the hall from mine. "I'm Tabo, by the way."
Tabo Mtembi.
"I just moved in last week." "Chen Wei," I replied automatically, then felt awkward about the brevity of my introduction. "I am opera singer. And I'm a rapper," he said, and I could see a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Guess we're both in the business of making noise." There was something about the way he said it, not mockingly, but with a kind of understanding, that made me look at him differently. This wasn't just some stranger complaining about noise. This was another artist, someone who understood the compulsion to create even when the world didn't make it easy. "Perhaps," I said slowly, "we can make schedule, so we both can work." "That's not a bad idea," Tabo said, and this time he smiled fully. "You practice your opera, I work on my beats and lyrics. We figure out a system." That conversation in my doorway was the beginning of everything. Over the next few weeks, Tabo and I developed a routine. He would work on his music during the day and early evening, using headphones or keeping the volume low. I would practice my vocals late at night when the building was quieter. Sometimes our schedules overlapped, and we would coordinate timing through text messages sent between our apartments. But more than just scheduling, we began to actually talk. I learned that Tabo had come to Beijing on a cultural exchange program, part of an initiative to promote artistic collaboration between China and South Africa. He was studying Mandarin at Beijing Language and Culture University, while also working with local hip-hop producers to create music that blended traditional African rhythms with contemporary Chinese influences. "It's not easy," he told me one evening when we ran into each other in the building's tiny lobby. "People here don't really get what I'm trying to do. Hip-hop is still pretty underground, and the stuff I'm working on doesn't fit into any neat category." "I understand," I said, and I realized I really did. Opera is very traditional. People expect certain things. When you try to bring new interpretation, they say you are not respecting culture. "Exactly." His face lit up with recognition. Back in Johannesburg, I was too experimental for the traditional hip-hop scene, but here I'm too foreign. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck between worlds. I knew that feeling intimately. My own struggles with the Beijing opera world were different but parallel. I had grown up in a family where opera was everything. My grandfather had been a renowned performer. My father was a respected teacher, and my mother had sacrificed her own artistic ambitions to support the family tradition. From the age of 5, I had been trained in the rigid disciplines of movement, voice, and character interpretation that define Beijing opera. But I had always felt slightly out of step with the tradition. My interpretations were too emotional, my vocal style too modern, my stage presence too personal. The masters at the conservatory constantly reminded me that Beijing opera was about preserving ancient art forms, not expressing individual creativity. "You must disappear into the role," Master Zhang, my primary instructor, would say. "The audience should see the character, not Chen Wei." But I couldn't make myself disappear. Every time I performed, something of my own soul came through, and while some audience members responded to that authenticity, the traditional critics found it inappropriate and undisciplined. As Tabo and I talked more, I began to realize that despite our completely different backgrounds and musical styles, we were facing remarkably similar challenges. We were both artists trying to honor our cultural heritage while also expressing our individual voices. We were both struggling with the expectations of our respective communities. And we were both dealing with the profound loneliness that comes from feeling like no one really understands your artistic vision. "Want to hear what I'm working on?" Tabo asked one night after we had been talking in the hallway for over an hour. I followed him into his apartment, which was a mirror image of mine but felt completely different. Where my space was minimal and organized around my practice needs, his was filled with recording equipment, instruments I didn't recognize, and artwork that spoke to a life I could barely imagine. The walls were covered with posters of hip-hop artists, photographs of South African landscapes, and handwritten lyrics in both English and what I assumed was Zulu. He put on headphones and gestured for me to do the same, then played me a track he had been working on. The beat was complex and layered, combining traditional African drums with electronic elements and what sounded like samples of Chinese traditional music. Over this foundation, he rapped in multiple languages: English, Mandarin, and what I later learned was Zulu, weaving together stories of displacement, identity, and the search for belonging. It was unlike anything I had ever heard, and it moved me in ways I didn't expect. The emotional honesty in his voice, the way he blended different musical traditions without losing the essence of any of them, the raw vulnerability in his lyrics. It all spoke to something deep inside me that I had never been able to express in my own art. "This is beautiful," I said when the song ended, and I meant it completely. "You think so?" He looked genuinely surprised. "Most people don't know what to make of it. It is like you are singing your soul," I said, struggling to find the right words in English. "In opera, we have saying, the voice must come from the heart, not just the throat. Your music comes from heart." Something shifted in his expression as I said that. He studied my face for a long moment, then asked, "Would you mind if I heard you sing? I mean, not your practice stuff, but really sing? Something that means something to you." I hesitated. I had never performed for anyone outside of formal settings, classes, auditions, official performances. The idea of singing for this stranger in his apartment, surrounded by his foreign instruments and unfamiliar artwork, should have terrified me, but instead, I felt a strange sense of safety and possibility. "I can sing," I said quietly, "but not traditional opera. Something different. Whatever you want to share." I closed my eyes and let myself feel the music that lived inside me. The songs that had no place in formal Beijing opera but that expressed who I really was. What came out was a melody that blended traditional Chinese musical scales with more contemporary emotional expression, sung in Mandarin but with a vulnerability that transcended language barriers. The song was about loneliness, about feeling trapped between who you are and who everyone expects you to be, about the courage it takes to keep creating when no one seems to understand your vision. As I sang, I opened my eyes and saw Tabo watching me with complete attention, his expression shifting from curiosity to recognition to something deeper that I couldn't quite name. When I finished, the apartment was completely silent except for the hum of his recording equipment. "That was incredible," he said finally. "I've never heard anything like that before." "It is not proper opera," I said, suddenly self-conscious. "My teachers would not approve." "Forget your teachers for a minute. That was real. That was you, not some character you're supposed to disappear into. The way he said it, with such certainty and acceptance, made something inside me crack open. I realized that I had never had anyone in my life who encouraged the parts of my artistry that felt most authentic to me. Would you? I started, then stopped. This is crazy idea. What? Would you want to try making music together? Your rap? My singing? I know it sounds strange, but when I hear your music and you hear mine, maybe there is something we could create. Tabo's face broke into a grin. I was hoping you'd say that. I've been thinking the same thing since I heard you sing. That night marked the beginning of the most creative and personally transformative period of my life. Tabo and I started meeting regularly, initially just to experiment with combining our different musical styles, but gradually developing something that was entirely new and entirely ours. The process wasn't easy. We came from completely different musical traditions, spoke different primary languages, and had different approaches to composition and performance. But we also had a shared understanding of what it meant to feel like an outsider in your own artistic community. And that common ground became the foundation for everything we built together. Listen to this, Tabo would say, playing a beat he had created that incorporated elements of traditional Chinese instruments. Can you hear where your voice might fit? And I would listen, not just to the music but to the emotion underneath it, finding places where my vocal training could serve his artistic vision while still expressing something essentially true to my own experience. What if we tried this section in Mandarin, but with the rhythm of your rap style? I suggested during one session. The tones of Chinese language, they can be very musical when you play with them. We spent hours working on these fusion pieces, with me teaching Tabo about the emotional storytelling traditions of Beijing opera and him showing me how hip-hop could be a vehicle for social commentary and personal revelation. Neither of us was trying to abandon our original training, but we were both discovering how that training could serve a broader, more personal artistic vision. The more time we spent together, the more I began to understand that what we were creating went beyond just musical collaboration. Tabo listened to me in a way that no one ever had, not just to my voice, but to my ideas, my fears, my dreams for what art could be. And I found myself able to be vulnerable with him in ways that felt both terrifying and essential. Why did you start doing opera? He asked me one evening as we took a break from recording. Family tradition, I said automatically, then paused. But that is not complete answer. I started because it was expected, but I continued because when I sing, I feel like I am touching something eternal, like I am part of conversation that has been happening for hundreds of years. But I also want to say something new in that conversation, something that is mine. And your family doesn't understand that? I shook my head. They think individual expression is selfish. They think art should preserve tradition, not change it. That's rough, man. My family is different. They don't really understand what I do, but they support me trying to make something of myself. My mother always says, as long as you're not hurting anyone and you're working hard, follow your heart. I envy that, I said quietly. What would happen if you just did what you wanted? If you made the music you want to make? I would probably be disowned. I would definitely lose my place at the conservatory. And I would have no way to support myself. But would you be happy? It was such a simple question, but it hit me like a physical blow. I realized that I had never really considered my own happiness as a factor in my artistic choices. Everything had always been about duty, tradition, and meeting other people's expectations. I don't know, I admitted. I have never tried to be happy, only to be good enough. Maybe it's time to find out. As our musical collaboration deepened, so did our personal connection. I began to look forward to our evening sessions not just because of the creative work we were doing, but because of the way Tabo made me feel seen and understood. He had a way of asking questions that helped me understand myself better, and he listened to my answers with a kind of attention that I had never experienced before. Tell me about growing up in your family, he said one night as we sat in his apartment, sharing takeout food between recording sessions. I told him about the pressure, the constant evaluation, the way every aspect of my life had been shaped around becoming a worthy successor to my family's artistic legacy. I told him about the loneliness of being the only child, carrying all the expectations without anyone to share the burden. I told him about the moments when I loved performing so much it felt like flying, and the moments when I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of other people's dreams. "What about you?" I asked. "What was it like growing up in Johannesburg?" Tabo told me about a childhood that was completely different from mine but carried its own complexities. He had grown up in Soweto, in a family that valued education and respectability but struggled economically. His passion for hip-hop had been seen as a distraction from more practical pursuits, and his artistic ambitions had often been viewed with skepticism by a community that prioritized survival over self-expression. "I was always the weird kid who was more interested in writing rhymes than playing sports," he said. "I love my family, but they never really understood why I needed to do this. They wanted me to get a good job, buy a house, settle down with a nice girl, give them grandchildren. And you wanted different things?" "I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to use music to talk about what it's like to grow up where I grew up, to feel the things I felt. And I wanted to see the world, to understand how my experience connected to other people's experiences." "Is that why you came to China?" "Partly, but also because I was running from some things at home. Some expectations I couldn't meet, some parts of myself I wasn't ready to face." There was something in his voice when he said that last part, something that made me think he was talking about more than just career expectations. But I didn't push. I was beginning to understand that Tabo, like me, had layers of complexity that couldn't be easily explained or quickly understood. Our first public performance together happened almost by accident. Tabo had been invited to perform at an underground hip-hop event in one of Beijing's more alternative neighborhoods, and at the last minute, he asked if I wanted to join him on stage. "I don't know," I said, feeling nervous about performing our experimental fusion music for an audience that would have no context for what we were trying to do. "Come on," he said. "We've been working on this stuff for 2 months. Don't you want to see how people react?" The venue was unlike anywhere I had ever performed. It was a small basement club with graffiti-covered walls, dim lighting, and an audience of young people who looked like they had stepped out of a completely different world from the one I knew. Most of them were Chinese, but there were also foreigners from various countries, all united by their love of hip-hop culture and alternative artistic expression. I stood at the side of the stage watching Tabo perform his solo pieces first, and I was amazed by his stage presence. He commanded attention effortlessly, moving with confidence and charisma, his voice carrying clearly over the complex beats, his lyrics painting vivid pictures of his experiences and observations. The audience was completely engaged, responding to his energy and hanging on every word. Then he called me onto the stage. "I want to introduce you to someone special," he said, speaking in Mandarin to the audience. "This is Chun Wei, and he's about to blow your minds with something you've never heard before." I walked onto the stage feeling terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. The audience looked curious but skeptical. What could a traditional opera singer possibly contribute to a hip-hop show? Then the music started and I began to sing. Our first song together was a piece we had written about feeling caught between worlds, about the struggle to honor your heritage while also expressing your individual truth. Tabo rapped verses in English and Mandarin about his experience as a South African in China, about racism and displacement and the search for artistic authenticity. I sang the chorus and bridge sections, using traditional Chinese vocal techniques but with contemporary emotional expression, my voice soaring over his beats in ways that created entirely new sonic landscapes. The audience was silent at first, trying to process what they were hearing. But as the song progressed, I could see recognition and excitement spreading through the crowd. They were witnessing something unprecedented, a genuine fusion of musical traditions that honored both sources while creating something entirely new. When we finished, the applause was thunderous. People were shouting and cheering, and I could see genuine amazement on their faces. Several audience members approached us afterward, wanting to know more about our collaboration and when they could hear more of our music. "That was incredible," said one young woman who spoke to us in fluent English. "I've never heard anything like that before. It was like watching two completely different worlds come together and create something beautiful." "You two have something special," said another audience member. "You should record this stuff and get it out there." Walking home that night, Both of us high on adrenaline and excitement, Tabo and I talked about what the performance had meant to us. I felt like myself up there, I said. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was using my training to express who I really am, not just to meet someone else's expectations. You were amazing, Tabo said. The way you used your voice, the way you connected with the audience, that's not something you can teach. That's just who you are as an artist. What about you? How did it feel to share the stage? Honestly, felt like coming home. Like I'd been looking for something without knowing what it was. And then suddenly there it was. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, and I found myself very aware of his presence beside me. The way he moved, the energy that radiated from him, the sense of safety and possibility I felt when we were together. Chen Wei, he said as we reached our apartment building. Yes, I'm really glad you knocked on my door to complain about the noise. I think you knocked on my door, I said, laughing. Right? Well, I'm glad one of us did. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the performance, about the way it had felt to share something so personal and creative with an audience, about the look on Tabo's face when we were on stage together. But mostly, I thought about the growing awareness that what I was feeling for him went beyond artistic collaboration or even friendship. I had never been in a romantic relationship with anyone. My life had been so focused on my training and meeting my family's expectations that I had never had time or energy for personal relationships. The few times people had shown interest in me, mostly women my parents had suggested as potential wives, I had felt nothing but anxiety and obligation. But with Tabo, everything was different. Being around him made me feel more like myself than I had ever felt before. He saw parts of me that I hadn't even known existed, and he not only accepted those parts but encouraged them to flourish. When we were creating music together, I felt a connection that was deeper than anything I had experienced before, artistic, emotional, and increasingly, I had to admit, physical. The realization that I might be falling in love with Tabo was both exhilarating and terrifying. It challenged everything I thought I knew about myself and everything my family had planned for my life. But it also felt more real and true than anything I had ever experienced. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of creative activity and personal discovery. Word about our performance had spread through Beijing's underground music scene, and we were invited to perform at several more venues. Each show was different, as we experimented with new combinations of our respective styles and developed a growing repertoire of original compositions. More importantly, Tabo and I were spending increasing amounts of time together outside of our musical work. We would walk through Beijing's parks, exploring different neighborhoods and talking about everything from our childhoods to our artistic philosophies to our dreams for the future. He was teaching me about South African culture and history, while I shared stories about Chinese traditions and my family's background. I want to understand where you come from, he said one afternoon as we sat by a lake in Zhongshan Park, watching elderly people practice Tai Chi. Not just the music part, but all of it. Your family, your traditions, what shaped you. Why? I asked, though I thought I knew the answer. Because understanding you matters to me. Because I care about you as more than just a musical collaborator. The way he said it, with such sincerity and directness, made my heart race. I realized that we were approaching a moment of truth in our relationship, a point where we would have to acknowledge what was happening between us. Tabo, I said carefully, what is this? What are we doing? He was quiet for a long moment, watching the Tai Chi practitioners move through their slow, graceful forms. I think we're falling in love, he said finally, and I think we're both scared as hell about it. I have never, I started then stopped. Never been with a man? Never been with anyone. My life has been very focused. That doesn't matter, he said, turning to face me fully. What matters is how you feel now. I feel like my whole world is changing, I admitted. Like everything I thought I knew about myself is different. Is that good or bad? Terrifying, I said honestly, but also the most alive I have ever felt. He reached over and took my hand, and the simple touch sent electricity through my entire body. We don't have to figure everything out right now, he said. We can take this as slow as you need. What about your family? What about your life back in South Africa? What about them? Will they accept this? Will they accept me? Tabo was quiet for a moment, and I could see him working through his own concerns and fears. My family is complicated, he said finally. They love me, but they have traditional ideas about a lot of things. Being gay isn't exactly celebrated in my community. But Chunwei, I can't live my life trying to be what other people want me to be. I tried that for years, and it nearly killed me. Is that why you came to China? To escape those expectations? Partly. I was in a relationship back home, with someone I cared about but who wanted me to be someone I wasn't. I was trying to be straight, trying to be conventional, trying to fit into the life everyone expected me to have. But it was destroying me from the inside. What happened? I finally admitted that I couldn't keep pretending. The relationship ended, and a lot of people were disappointed in me. So I applied for this exchange program and came here, thinking maybe distance would help me figure out who I really am. And did it? Meeting you did, he said, squeezing my hand. You helped me remember that being authentic is worth any price you have to pay for it. That evening, we went back to his apartment and talked until dawn. We shared stories about our fears and dreams, our families and our artistic visions, our hopes for what our relationship might become. As the sun rose over Beijing, I knew that my life had changed irrevocably. I was in love with Thabo Mthembu, and that love was going to require me to be braver than I had ever been before. I want to be with you, I told him as we watched the sunrise through his window. I want to build something together, not just musically but personally. But I need you to know that this will not be easy. My family, my culture, my career, everything will be complicated. I know, he said. Mine too. But Chunwei, some things are worth fighting for. Are we worth fighting for? Absolutely. The first real test of our relationship came a few weeks later when my parents announced they were coming to Beijing to see my upcoming performance at the conservatory. I had been dreading this visit for months, knowing that my recent artistic explorations had taken me further away from the traditional path they expected me to follow. I want to meet them, Tabo said when I told him about the visit. That might not be a good idea, I said, feeling anxious about the potential confrontation. Why? Because I'm your boyfriend? Or because I'm black? Both? I admitted, hating how that sounded but knowing it was true. Chunwei, you can't hide parts of yourself from your family forever. I know, but I'm not ready for that conversation yet. Then when will you be ready? It was a fair question and I didn't have a good answer. I was still learning how to be in a relationship, still learning how to balance my personal desires with my family obligations, still learning how to be brave in situations that terrified me. My parents' visit was as difficult as I had expected. They arrived with specific expectations about my progress at the conservatory and my adherence to traditional opera techniques. When they attended my formal performance, I could see their disappointment in my interpretation, which had been influenced by my work with Tabo and my growing confidence in expressing emotional authenticity. You are being too modern, my father said after the show. The audience wants to see traditional Beijing opera, not your personal interpretation. But the audience responded well, I said, which was true. While the older, more traditional audience members had been reserved in their response, the younger people in attendance had been enthusiastic. That is not the point, my mother said. You are representing our family tradition. You have responsibility to preserve what has been passed down to you. What if I want to create something new while still honoring the tradition? That is not your decision to make, my father said firmly. You are still learning. When you have mastered the traditional forms completely, then perhaps you can consider small innovations. But not now. That night, I met Tabo at a small restaurant near the conservatory, feeling frustrated and emotionally drained. How did it go? He asked, taking one look at my face and immediately understanding that it hadn't gone well. They think I'm losing focus, I said. They think I'm being influenced by inappropriate ideas. Meaning me? They don't know about you specifically, but they know something is different about my approach to performing. And that's bad. According to them, yes. Tabo was quiet for a moment, then asked, What do you think? I think I'm becoming a better artist because of our work together. I think I'm learning to use my technical training to serve authentic emotional expression, which is what I always wanted to do. But I also think pursuing that path means disappointing the people who matter most to me. Your parents matter to you, but do their opinions matter more than your artistic integrity? That's easy for you to say. Your family isn't here, watching your every move, judging whether you're worthy of the sacrifices they made for you. You're right, he said. My family isn't here. But Chun-Wei, at some point you have to decide whether you're living your life or theirs. What if I choose my life and lose them completely? What if you choose their life and lose yourself completely? It was a question that haunted me for days. I loved my parents and respected the tradition they represented. But I was also beginning to understand that I couldn't sacrifice my authentic self to meet their expectations. The work I was doing with Tabo wasn't just about music. It was about discovering who I really was and what I had to offer the world. The confrontation I had been dreading came sooner than expected. My parents had extended their stay in Beijing to attend a special performance at the conservatory, and they decided to visit my apartment unannounced to discuss my future plans. When they knocked on my door, Tabo was there, and we were working on a new song that blended traditional Chinese melodies with contemporary hip-hop production. My parents' faces when they saw Tabo were a mixture of confusion, suspicion, and immediate disapproval. They had never seen anyone like him in my life. Foreign, casual, covered in tattoos, surrounded by recording equipment that represented everything they considered contrary to serious artistic pursuits. Wei-er, my mother said, using my childhood nickname. Who is this person? This is Tabo, I said in Mandarin, trying to keep my voice steady. He is my friend and musical collaborator. What kind of music do you make together? My father asked, his tone suggesting he already disapproved of whatever the answer might be. We combine traditional Chinese elements with contemporary styles, I said carefully. It is experimental, but it honors both of our cultural backgrounds. This is what has been distracting you from your studies, my mother said, not really asking. This is what has been inspiring me in my studies, I corrected. Tabo, who had been listening to this conversation in Mandarin without understanding most of it, finally spoke up in English. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, he said, bowing slightly in a gesture of respect. I'm honored to meet you. Your son is incredibly talented, and working with him has been one of the greatest privileges of my artistic career. My parents looked at him with barely concealed suspicion, then at me for translation. He says it is an honor to meet you, and that he respects my talent. I translated, leaving out the more personal parts of his statement. Ask him what his intentions are with your music career, my father said. Bah, I said, feeling embarrassed by the interrogation. Ask him. I reluctantly translated the question, and Tabo answered with more diplomacy than I had expected. I believe Chun-Wei has the potential to create music that bridges cultures and reaches new audiences while still honoring traditional Chinese artistry, he said. My hope is that our collaboration helps him develop his unique artistic voice. When I translated this, my parents exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their concern. This is not appropriate, my mother said after Tabo had left. You are being led away from your true path by someone who doesn't understand our culture or our expectations for you. He understands more than you think, I said, and he supports my artistic growth in ways that help me be a better opera singer, not a worse one. You are being influenced by foreign ideas that have no place in traditional Chinese opera, my father said. This person is filling your head with modern nonsense that will ruin your career. What if it doesn't ruin my career? What if it makes my career more meaningful? That is not a risk we can allow you to take, my mother said. You have obligations to this family and to the tradition we represent. And what about my obligations to myself? The question hung in the air between us, representing a fundamental disagreement about the purpose of art and the responsibilities of family. Your obligations to yourself are secondary to your obligations to your family, my father said finally. That is how we have raised you, and that is what we expect from you. That night, after spending hours in a difficult conversation with my parents that resolved nothing, I walked to Tabo's apartment feeling emotionally exhausted and more confused than ever. "How did it go?" he asked when he saw my face. "They want me to stop working with you," I said. "They think you are a bad influence who is leading me away from my true path." "And what do you think?" "I think they're afraid," I said. "Afraid that I'm changing in ways they can't control or predict." "Are you?" "Yes, and I'm afraid too." Tabo pulled me into his arms, and I let myself sink into the comfort of his embrace. Over the past few months, physical affection between us had developed naturally, holding hands, casual touches, embraces like this one. But we hadn't crossed certain lines, partly because I was still learning how to be in a romantic relationship and partly because the stakes of our situation felt so high. "What are you afraid of?" he asked quietly. "Losing them, losing you, making the wrong choice and regretting it for the rest of my life." "What would the right choice look like?" "I don't know. Maybe there isn't a right choice. Maybe there are just different choices with different consequences." "Then what feels most true to who you are?" I thought about the question seriously. When I was performing traditional opera according to my family's expectations, I felt technically competent but emotionally disconnected. When I was working with Tabo, creating music that blended our different backgrounds and expressed our authentic experiences, I felt more alive and creative than I ever had before. "Being with you feels true," I said finally. "Creating music with you feels like what I'm supposed to be doing with my life." "Then maybe that's your answer. Even if it means losing my family's support?" "Even then. Because Chunwei, you can't live your entire life trying to be someone else's version of who you should be." That night, for the first time, we made love. It was gentle and hesitant, both of us nervous about crossing this threshold in our relationship. But it was also the most natural thing in the world, the physical expression of the emotional and creative connection we had been building for months. Afterward, lying in his arms, I felt a sense of completeness that I had never experienced before. "I love you," I said, the words coming easily despite how difficult they might make my life. "I love you too," he replied. "Whatever happens with your family, whatever challenges we face, I love you. What if we can't make this work? What if the pressure is too much? Then at least we'll know we tried. At least we'll know we were brave enough to fight for something real." The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my parents and asked them to meet me at a tea house near their hotel. When they arrived, I had prepared what I wanted to say, though I knew it would be the most difficult conversation of my life. "Ma, ba," I said, "I need to tell you something important about my life." They sat across from me, their faces already showing concern about what they were about to hear. "I am in love with Tabo," I said in Mandarin. "He is not just my musical collaborator. He is my boyfriend, and I want to build a life with him." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face went pale, and my father's expression hardened in a way I had never seen before. "This is not possible," my mother said finally. "You are confused. This foreign person has manipulated you." "I am not confused," I said. "I am in love, and I am happier than I have ever been in my life." "You are throwing away everything we have worked for," my father said, his voice tight with anger and disappointment. "You are destroying your future for a temporary infatuation." "This is not temporary. And I am not destroying my future. I am creating a future that belongs to me." "You belong to this family," my mother said. "You have responsibilities that go beyond your personal desires." "What about my responsibility to be honest? What about my responsibility to live authentically?" "Those are selfish Western ideas," my father said. "They have no place in our family." "Then maybe I don't have a place in our family either." The words came out harsher than I had intended, and I could see them hit my parents like physical blows. But I also knew that I meant them. If being part of my family required me to deny who I was and who I loved, then I needed to choose a different path. "If you continue with this relationship," my father said finally, "you will no longer be welcome in our home. You will no longer be our son." "If that is your choice," I said, tears streaming down my face but my voice steady, "then I accept it. I left the tea house knowing that I had just sacrificed my family for my relationship with Tabo, and the weight of that decision was almost unbearable. But I also knew that I couldn't have made any other choice and remained true to myself. When I told Tabo what had happened, he held me while I cried, offering comfort without trying to minimize the pain of losing my family's support. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know how much they mean to you. They do mean everything to me, but you mean everything to me too. And I realized that I can't build a life on lies and compromises. What do you want to do now?" "I want to make music with you. I want to create art that matters. I want to see where this relationship takes us. Even without your family's support?" Even then, the months that followed were difficult but also transformative. Without the pressure of meeting my family's expectations, I was free to explore my artistic voice in ways I had never been able to before. Tabo and I developed a full repertoire of original songs that showcased both of our cultural backgrounds while creating something entirely new and contemporary. We started performing regularly at venues throughout Beijing, building a following among young people who were hungry for music that reflected their own experiences of living between cultures and challenging traditional expectations. Our performances were featured in local arts magazines, and we began receiving invitations to perform at festivals and events outside of Beijing. More importantly, our relationship continued to deepen and grow stronger. Living together, creating together, facing challenges together. All of it brought us closer and helped us understand each other more completely. "I want to take you to South Africa," Tabo said one evening as we walked through Beihai Park, enjoying the spring weather. "I want you to meet my family, to see where I come from. Are you sure they'll accept me? They'll love you because I love you. It might take them some time to understand our relationship, but they'll see how happy you make me. What about your music career there? Would there be opportunities for us to perform together?" "Absolutely. The music scene in Johannesburg is much more open to experimental and fusion styles than what we've found here, and there's a growing interest in cross-cultural collaboration." "I would like that," I said. "I would like to understand your culture the way you've learned to understand mine." 6 months later, we boarded a plane to Johannesburg, carrying our instruments and a collection of recordings that documented the musical journey we had taken together. I was nervous about meeting Tabo's family and experiencing South African culture, but I was also excited about the next phase of our adventure together. Tabo's family welcomed me with warmth and curiosity. His mother, Namsa, was a teacher who spoke excellent English and immediately began asking me questions about Chinese culture and my musical training. His father, Saifo, was more reserved but clearly proud of his son's artistic achievements. His younger sister, Zanil, was fascinated by our collaboration and wanted to know everything about how we created our fusion style. "You make my brother very happy," Namsa told me during a quiet moment while we were helping prepare dinner. "I have never seen him so confident and fulfilled." "He makes me happy too," I said. "He helped me find my authentic voice as an artist." "That is a precious gift," she said. "In our culture, we believe that when two people help each other become their best selves, they are meant to be together." The music scene in Johannesburg was everything Tabo had promised and more. We performed at venues ranging from intimate coffee shops to large festival stages, and the audiences were incredibly receptive to our cross-cultural approach. South African musicians were eager to collaborate with us, and we began working on projects that incorporated traditional African instruments and rhythms with Chinese melodies and contemporary production techniques. "This is what I dreamed our music could become," Tabo said after a particularly successful performance at the Johannesburg Arts Center. "This is the sound I was hearing in my head, but couldn't create until I found you. It's what I dreamed my voice could do," I said. "I always wanted to use my training to build bridges, not just preserve traditions." 2 years after we first met in that Beijing apartment building, Tabo and I had created a life together that neither of us could have imagined on our own. We had recording contracts with labels in both China and South Africa, we were touring internationally, and our music was being used in documentaries and films about cultural exchange and understanding. But more than professional success, we had built a relationship based on mutual respect, creative collaboration, and deep love. We had each become more ourselves through being together, and we had created something beautiful out of the combination of our different backgrounds and perspectives. Do you ever regret it? Tabo asked me one evening as we sat on the balcony of our apartment in Johannesburg, watching the sunset and planning our next album. Regret what? Giving up your family's approval. Choosing this path instead of the traditional one. I thought about the question seriously. I still missed my parents, still felt sad about the relationship we had lost. But I also knew that I was living an authentic life that honored my artistic gifts and my personal truth. I regret the pain it caused, I said finally. But I don't regret the choice. This life, this relationship, this music we make together, it's who I'm supposed to be. I love you, Chinwe. I love you too, Thabo Mthembu. As we sat together in the gathering darkness, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. From that first night when he knocked on my door to complain about noise, to this evening when we were planning the next phase of our shared creative and personal adventure, it had been an extraordinary transformation. We had taken two very different artistic traditions and found ways to honor both while creating something entirely new. We had taken two very different cultural backgrounds and learned from each other without losing our individual identities. We had taken two hearts that had been searching for understanding and connection, and we had built a love that was strong enough to weather any storm. This was our harmony in chaos, the beautiful music that could emerge when two people were brave enough to be vulnerable with each other, creative enough to imagine new possibilities, and committed enough to do the hard work of building something meaningful together. And it was just the beginning. We had so many more songs to write, so many more stages to perform on, so many more ways to use our love and our art to bring people together across the divides of culture, language, and tradition. The code of our hearts was written in multiple languages, sung in different styles, but unified by the universal truth that love and creativity can overcome any barrier when they are pursued with courage and authenticity. Here's to the music we would continue to make together, whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. 5 years later, our story had evolved in ways neither of us could have predicted. What started as a chance encounter between neighbors had grown into something that changed not just our lives, but the lives of countless others who found inspiration in our music and our love story. We were sitting in the green room of the Sydney Opera House, preparing for what would be our most significant performance to date. The Harmony Across Borders concert was being broadcast live to over 50 countries, featuring artists from around the world who were breaking down cultural barriers through their music. Tabo and I had been invited as the headlining act, a recognition of how far our fusion of Chinese opera and South African hip-hop had traveled from that small Beijing apartment. "Can you believe we're here?" Tabo asked, adjusting his performance outfit, a custom-designed jacket that incorporated traditional Zulu beadwork with Chinese silk patterns. 5 years ago, I was just trying to find my place in the world, and you were hiding your true voice behind tradition. Now look at us, I said, warming up my voice with scales that had become second nature. About to perform for millions of people, showing them that different doesn't mean incompatible. The journey to this moment had been filled with challenges and triumphs that had tested our relationship and strengthened our resolve. After establishing ourselves in Johannesburg, we had spent 2 years touring across Africa, Asia, and eventually Europe and the Americas. Each new audience taught us something different about how music could transcend cultural boundaries. In Lagos, Nigeria, we performed with Afrobeat musicians who added complex percussion to our fusion sound. In Tokyo, we collaborated with traditional shamisen players who found unexpected harmony with my operatic vocals. In London, we worked with British Pakistani rappers who shared Tabo's experience of navigating multiple cultural identities. Each collaboration expanded our understanding of what our music could become. But perhaps the most meaningful development had been our work with young artists who were struggling with the same challenges we had faced, feeling caught between different worlds, fighting for acceptance from their families and communities, trying to honor their heritage while expressing their individual truth. The mentorship program has been the most rewarding part of all of this, I said to Tabo as we watched the pre-show activities through the green room monitor. Seeing these young people find their voices, find their courage, it's better than any applause we've ever received. 3 years earlier, we had established the Harmony Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provided resources and support for LGBTQ+ artists from diverse cultural backgrounds. The foundation offered scholarships, mentorship programs, and performance opportunities for young people who were creating fusion art forms or dealing with family rejection because of their identity or artistic choices. Our first scholarship recipient had been Lin Chun, a young Chinese-American violinist who was blending classical Western techniques with traditional Chinese eru playing while also navigating his parents' disapproval of his relationship with his boyfriend. Under our mentorship, Lin had developed a performance style that honored both his Chinese heritage and his American upbringing, while also being openly gay in communities where that wasn't always accepted. You showed me that I didn't have to choose between being Chinese and being American, between being a classical musician and being myself, Lin had told us at his first major concert. You proved that authenticity makes art stronger, not weaker. Similar stories had emerged from dozens of young artists we had worked with through the foundation. There was Amara, a young Moroccan woman who rapped in Arabic and French about feminist themes while incorporating traditional Nawa music. There was James, a Native American opera singer who was creating contemporary works based on traditional stories from his Lakota heritage. There was Kenji, a Japanese-Brazilian DJ who was blending samba rhythms with electronic music while openly celebrating his relationship with his male partner. Each of these artists faced unique challenges, but they all shared the experience of feeling like outsiders in their own communities until they found ways to integrate all aspects of their identity into their art. The foundation work is what gives everything else meaning, Tabo said, reviewing his performance notes one final time. The concerts, the albums, the recognition, it's all wonderful, but it's the kids we're helping that make it worthwhile. Our personal relationship had also continued to evolve and deepen. 3 years earlier, we had had a commitment ceremony in Cape Town, surrounded by both of our families, including, to my surprise and joy, my parents, who had slowly begun to accept our relationship after seeing how happy and successful we had become together. The reconciliation with my family had been gradual and sometimes painful. Initially, they had maintained their position that I was throwing away my heritage and my responsibilities. But as our music gained recognition and we began to be featured in Chinese media as cultural ambassadors, their perspective began to shift. The turning point had come when we were invited to perform at the Beijing Music Festival, one of China's most prestigious cultural events. My parents attended the concert, and afterward, my mother had said something that moved me to tears. "I see now that you were not abandoning our traditions," she had said. "You were finding new ways to share them with the world. You have brought more honor to our family through your authentic artistry than you ever could have through simple obedience." "Does this mean you accept Tabo?" I had asked. "I accept that he makes you happy, and that your happiness has made you a better artist and a better person," she had replied. "I may not understand everything about your relationship, but I understand love when I see it." My father had been more reserved, but he had also begun to soften. During our commitment ceremony, he had performed a traditional Chinese song wishing us happiness and prosperity, his voice carrying decades of training, but also genuine emotion. "Your father is proud of you," my mother had whispered to me during the ceremony. "He just doesn't know how to express it in ways that feel familiar to him." Tabo's family had been supportive from the beginning, but they had also grown in their understanding of what our relationship meant and what we were trying to accomplish through our art. "You two are showing the world that love doesn't have borders," Namsa had said during her speech at our ceremony. "You're proving that when people are brave enough to be themselves and to love authentically, beautiful things happen." Now, as we prepared for our Sydney Opera House performance, I reflected on how much both of our families had become part of our extended artistic family. They attended our concerts when possible, helped promote our foundation work in their communities, and served as examples of how acceptance and understanding could develop even when it didn't come naturally. 5 minutes to showtime, announced the stage manager, and I felt the familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness that preceded every major performance. "Ready?" Tabo asked, taking my hand. "Always, when I'm with you." The Sydney Opera House audience was unlike any we had performed for before. The venue seated over 2,000 people, but the live broadcast meant we were actually performing for millions. The audience included music industry professionals, cultural ambassadors, government officials, and music lovers from dozens of countries. As we walked onto the stage, I was struck by the diversity of faces looking back at us. This was exactly the kind of audience we had dreamed of reaching when we first started experimenting with our fusion style. People from different backgrounds united by their love of music and their openness to new artistic experiences. Our performance that night was a retrospective of our 5-year journey together, featuring songs from our various albums and collaborations. We opened with Noise Complaint, the song we had written about our first meeting, which had become something of an anthem for unlikely love stories. The audience laughed at the playful lyrics about neighbors discovering they were soulmates. We continued with Between Worlds, our exploration of cultural identity and belonging, which featured some of my most challenging operatic vocals layered over Tabo's complex rap verses about displacement and discovery. The technical demands of the song required perfect synchronization between us, something we had developed through years of performance together. The emotional centerpiece of the evening was Family, a song we had written about the pain and eventual joy of family acceptance. As I sang the bridge, a soaring melody about love transcending cultural differences, I saw my parents in the audience, my mother wiping tears from her eyes. But the highlight of the performance was the debut of our newest composition, Future Harmony, which we had written specifically for this concert. The song imagined a world where cultural fusion was celebrated rather than feared, where young people could honor their heritage while also expressing their individual truth, where love was recognized as love regardless of the specific forms it took. This is for every young person who has ever felt like they had to choose between different parts of themselves, Tabo said to the audience before we began the song. You don't have to choose. You can be everything you are. The song featured guest vocals from Lin Chan and 2 other Foundation Scholarship recipients who had flown to Sydney to perform with us. Hearing their voices blend with ours, seeing the next generation of cross-cultural artists taking the stage with confidence and pride, felt like the culmination of everything we had been working toward. The standing ovation lasted for nearly 10 minutes, and I could see audience members of all ages and backgrounds on their feet, many of them clearly moved by what they had experienced. That was incredible, said the concert's producer as we came off stage. I've never seen an audience respond like that. You didn't just perform for them. You created a moment of genuine connection and understanding. The after-party was filled with industry professionals, fellow musicians, and cultural leaders who wanted to discuss potential collaborations and projects. But the conversation that meant the most to me was with a young Chinese-Australian man who approached us during a quiet moment. I just wanted to thank you, he said, his voice shaking slightly with emotion. I'm 19, and I've been struggling with coming out to my traditional Chinese family, while also trying to pursue music that doesn't fit into any neat category. Seeing you two tonight, seeing how you've built this beautiful life and career together while honoring both of your backgrounds, it gives me hope that I can do the same. You can, I said, remembering my own struggles at his age. It won't always be easy, but if you stay true to yourself and your art, you'll find your way. What advice would you give to someone just starting this journey? He asked. Find your community, Tabo said. Find other artists and other people who understand what you're going through. You don't have to figure everything out alone. And remember that authenticity is a gift to your audience, I added. The more honestly you express your truth, the more you help other people understand and express theirs. As we flew back to Johannesburg the next day, Tabo and I talked about what the Sydney performance had meant and where we wanted to go next with our music and our foundation work. I've been thinking about expanding the foundation to include residential programs, Tabo said as we settled into our seats for the long flight home. Not just scholarships and mentorship, but actual safe spaces where young LGBTQ+ artists can live and work while they develop their craft and figure out their identity. Like artistic residencies? Exactly, but specifically for kids who might not be safe or supported at home. Places where they can be completely themselves while also getting serious artistic training. I love that idea, I said. We could have programs in different cities, maybe partner with established arts institutions. Beijing and Johannesburg first, then maybe expand to other places where we have strong connections. It would be expensive to operate. The foundation is doing well financially, and I think we could attract major donors who care about LGBTQ plus rights and arts education. As the plane climbed above the clouds, I thought about how much our vision had expanded since those early days of simply wanting to make music together. We had become not just artists but activists, not just partners but advocates for young people facing the same challenges we had overcome. 6 months later, we opened the first Harmony House in Johannesburg, a residential facility that could house up to 20 young artists while they participated in intensive training programs and developed their artistic voices. The program attracted applications from across Africa, and our first cohort included musicians, visual artists, dancers, and writers from 12 different countries. This is what I dreamed of when I first started rapping, Thabo said during the opening ceremony. Not just making music, but creating opportunities for the next generation to make their mark. The success of the Johannesburg program led to funding for a second facility in Beijing, where we partnered with several universities to provide both artistic training and academic opportunities. The Beijing program attracted young people from throughout Asia who were dealing with family pressure, cultural expectations, and the challenges of being LGBTQ+ in societies that didn't always welcome diversity. What you're doing is revolutionary, said Dr. Sarah Kim, a professor of cultural studies who served on our foundation's advisory board. You're not just supporting individual artists, you're creating a model for how art can be used to build bridges and create understanding across cultural divides. Our own artistic work continued to evolve as well. Our fourth album, Harmony House, featured collaborations with many of the young artists we had worked with through our programs. The album's lead single, Safe Space, became an anthem for LGBTQ+ youth around the world and was used in several documentary films about identity and belonging. But perhaps our most ambitious project was The Opera of Us, a full-length theatrical work that told the story of our relationship and the broader themes of cultural identity, family acceptance, and artistic authenticity. The opera blended traditional Beijing opera staging and costumes with contemporary music and storytelling, creating something that was entirely new while still honoring the traditions that had shaped both of us. "This is your masterpiece," said Chen Lu, a prominent Chinese opera critic, after attending a preview performance in Beijing. "You have created something that speaks to universal human experiences, while also celebrating the specific beauty of Chinese artistic traditions." The opera toured internationally, performing in venues ranging from traditional opera houses to contemporary arts centers. Each performance sparked conversations about identity, love, and the role of tradition in modern artistic expression. "We're not just telling our story," I said during a talkback session after a performance in London. "We're showing how individual love stories can become universal narratives about acceptance and understanding. The most political thing we can do is live authentically and love openly," Thabo added. "When people see that our relationship has made us better artists and better people, it challenges their assumptions about what different kinds of love can accomplish." As we entered our 7th year together, both personally and professionally, I often reflected on the journey that had brought us from that Beijing apartment building to international recognition as artists and advocates. The young man who had been afraid to disappoint his family by expressing his authentic artistic voice had become someone who encouraged thousands of other young people to find and use their own voices. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had never met?" I asked Thabo one evening as we sat in our garden in Johannesburg, planning our next foundation initiative. "Never," he said immediately. "I think we were always meant to find each other. Maybe not in that exact way, but somehow. Because of destiny, because of music, because real artists recognize each other, regardless of what language they speak or what traditions they come from. We heard something in each other that we needed to hear, and we gave each other permission to be brave. We gave each other permission to be ourselves." That evening, we received a video message from Li Ming, one of our first scholarship recipients, who was now performing professionally in Shanghai and had just gotten engaged to his boyfriend of 3 years. "I wanted you to know that I proposed using a song I wrote based on the techniques you taught me," he said in the video. "I blended traditional Chinese instruments with contemporary pop vocals, and I sang to him about how love can create harmony even when everything else feels chaotic." He said yes, and he said the song was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. "This is why we do it," Tabo said after we finished watching the video. "This is why all the hard work and difficult conversations and family drama was worth it. To help other people find their voices, to help other people find their happiness, to prove that love really can change the world, one song at a time." Our 8th year together brought new challenges and opportunities. We were invited to serve as cultural ambassadors for a United Nations initiative promoting cross-cultural understanding through the arts. The position required us to travel extensively, performing in countries where LGBTQ+ rights were limited and where our relationship itself was a form of activism. "Are you sure we want to do this?" I asked Tabo as we reviewed the proposed itinerary. "Some of these countries don't recognize same-sex relationships. We could face real dangers." "That's exactly why we need to do it," he said. "If we only perform in places where we're already accepted, we're preaching to the choir. The places where our love story is controversial are the places where it might make the biggest difference." Our tour as UN cultural ambassadors took us to 23 countries over 6 months. In some places, we were welcomed enthusiastically by audiences hungry for messages of acceptance and understanding. In others, we faced protests and government restrictions on what we could say or perform. But everywhere we went, we met young people who connected with our music and our story. In Cairo, a young Egyptian musician approached us after a performance to say that our music had given him the courage to come out to his family. In Jakarta, a group of Indonesian artists asked us to mentor them in creating fusion music that honored their traditional culture, while also expressing their contemporary experiences. "Music really is a universal language," I said to Tabo after a particularly moving performance in Mumbai, where we had collaborated with local musicians to create a spontaneous fusion of Chinese opera, South African hip-hop, and traditional Indian classical music. "And love is a universal experience," he replied. "People might express it differently, but everyone understands what it feels like to care about someone so much that you want to build a life with them." The UN tour culminated in a special performance at the General Assembly in New York, where we performed for delegates from 193 countries. The song we chose was One Voice, a composition we had written specifically for the event that featured lyrics in Mandarin, English, Zulu, and Arabic, representing the linguistic diversity of the communities we had worked with. "Music has the power to transcend the differences that divide us," I said in my address to the delegates. "When we listen to each other's stories, when we open our hearts to each other's experiences, we discover that we have more in common than we have differences. Love is not a Western concept or an Eastern concept," Tabo added. "It's a human concept, and when we celebrate love in all its forms, we create a world where everyone can thrive." The standing ovation from the UN delegates was one of the most meaningful moments of our career, representing recognition not just of our artistic achievements but of our work as advocates for understanding and acceptance. Now, as I write this story, Tabo and I are preparing for our next adventure. We've been invited to establish a permanent cultural exchange program between China and South Africa, with support from both governments and several international arts organizations. The program will bring young artists from both countries together for extended collaboration and cultural immersion. "It's like coming full circle," Tabo said when we received the invitation. "We started as 2 individuals learning about each other's cultures, and now we get to facilitate that same kind of learning for hundreds of other young people. And we get to do it together," I said, "still learning from each other, still growing together." Looking back on our journey from noise complaints to international recognition, from individual artistic struggles to collaborative advocacy, I'm amazed by how much can change when 2 people are brave enough to be vulnerable with each other and committed enough to do the hard work of building something meaningful together. We took 2 very different musical traditions and found ways to honor both while creating something entirely new. We took 2 hearts that had been searching for understanding and built a love strong enough to weather cultural disapproval, family rejection, and the pressures of international visibility. We took our personal story and used it to create opportunities for countless other young people to find their voices and their courage. This is our harmony in chaos, the beautiful music that emerges when people choose love over fear, authenticity over conformity, and collaboration over competition. It's proof that the most powerful art comes from the honest expression of human truth, regardless of what languages that truth speaks or what traditions it draws from. And this is still just the beginning. We have so many more songs to write, so many more young people to mentor, so many more bridges to build between communities that think they have nothing in common. The music of our love continues to evolve, creating new harmonies and exploring new possibilities with each passing year. Whatever challenges and opportunities lie ahead, we'll face them together, continuing to prove that love really can change the world, one note at a time.